Okay, so my children, who I've instructed to be quiet, are playing around, and I will see how well they do at this. This is something I'm training them to do because I need them to grow up and inherit everything and help me manage it. So, parenting. That's how I do it. So, we were on Beyond Good and Evil, the Walter Kaufman translation, aphorism number 4. I had trouble uploading aphorism number 2 to Rumble for some reason. The video just wouldn't upload. Figure out why. Maybe I'll put a little introduction, some like Nietzsche themed thing in the middle of the video or at the beginning of the video, sort of like I don't know, because that would let me put the video into CapCut, which might change the file in a way that allows Rumble to upload it. I don't know why Rumble can't upload it, but without further ado, aphorism number 4. No, Katarina, stay away. Stay away from the camera. Stay. It's okay. It's okay. The falseness of a judgment is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting. Shh, quiet, Katarina. It is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. And we are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori, and then the footnote says, one of Kant's central questions was, how are synthetic judgments a priori possible? He meant judgments that are known for certain to be true independently of experience, but not by definition. His examples include the judgment that every event has a cause. So then it talks about like Hans Valhinger, a leading Kant scholar who published his own book Nietzsche as Philosophy, 1902, 4th edition, 1916, later published his own theory of necessary fictions under the title Die Philosophie des als Ob, 1911, English translation by C.K. Ogden. Shh. April, quiet. 1924, The Philosophy of As If, devoting a final chapter to detailed discussion of Nietzsche's similar ideas, cf. section 11 below. So let's go back. So he says, which includes synthetic judgments a priori, are not, I'll start the sentence all over again. And we are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori, are the most indispensable for us, that without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of the unconditional and self-identical, without a constant falsification of the world by means of number, man could not live, that renouncing false judgments would mean renouncing life and a denial of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way, and a philosophy that risks this would, by that token alone, place itself beyond good and evil. April, go out of the frame. You gotta wait. Katarina, do you want to go inside with April? Okay, go inside. Be safe. The falseness of a judgment is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. So I don't necessarily agree with everything Nietzsche says, but it's interesting. His perspective is very interesting and useful. The falseness of a judgment is not necessarily an objection to that judgment. So this is where even that, like the fact that Nietzsche is wrong is not necessarily an objection to Nietzsche. In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. So I would even say I kind of agree with Nietzsche here, because I don't necessarily agree with all of Nietzsche, but I think that Nietzsche himself is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, and perhaps even species-cultivating. I wonder if that's his intention. We are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori, are the most indispensable for us, that without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of unconditional and self-identical, without a constant falsification of the world by means of number, man could not live, that renouncing false judgments would mean renouncing life and the denial of life, to recognize untruth as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way, and a philosophy that risks this would, by that token alone, place itself beyond good and evil. So, wow, that's interesting. So what he's basically, I think he's going after Descartes slightly here, and Descartes' logic and insistence on logic and number. And, because Descartes, I don't know, I'm not super familiar with the ethics of Descartes, but he's sort of, and this is the prejudice, this section 1 is on the prejudices of philosophers. So he's saying that he just kind of circumvents all this ontology, all this thought about what is and is not true, and basically takes a pragmatic, I would say this is like the William James school of pragmatism right here. This is very much like American pragmatism. The falseness of a judgment is for us not necessarily an objection to a judgment. In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. We are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori, are the most indispensable for us. That without accepting the fictions of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of the unconditional and self-identical, and then this is where that's mathematics, is what he's talking about. Without a constant falsification of the world by means of number, he gets even more specific. He's like, just math, people. Like, without mathematics, would mean renouncing life and the denial of life. To recognize untruth as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way. And a philosophy that risks this would, by that token alone, place itself beyond good and evil. So he's talking about this, like, let's say we're going to place the truth, like true representations of reality. Let's say we're like, can we know ultimate truth? Maybe. Is knowing ultimate truth desirable? Yes. We should try to know ultimate truth, because by trying to know ultimate truth, we ultimately base what we're working on in truth. I mean, don't we need to know truth to live? And then Nietzsche sort of turns this on its head a little bit. He says he's trying to point at a deeper understanding of truth that I believe is ultimately the sort of truth represented by God on the cross, by the incarnation of God, this embodied truth. Because for us to insist that our words be true means to abandon fictions. He's like, don't represent the world by means of a fiction. What we say should be true. And then he's saying that mathematics is a fiction by which we say, we're going to, it's like getting rid of air resistance. It's like reducing something down to its mathematical definition is a sort of fiction. We're saying that it's like the fence, that there's a fence in front of me. That fence is this infinitely complex thing that exists in a multifaceted way, but I take its complexity and I essentially lie about it. I say it is merely fence. It is represented by the symbol of the word fence. And then I start ascribing numbers to it. I'm like, there's this many planks. It's like, what's a plank? A plank's whatever I define it as. So it's like, he basically, you could, in ontology, there's this problem of continuing definitions. It's like, if a definition is simply based, this is why Nietzsche is so brilliant. This is why I'm breaking it down in this way. And this is probably I could be talking about this for a long time. I don't know how long I'm going to keep talking about this until it's explained, but this is like the brilliance of Nietzsche, and this is why I have to explain Nietzsche in this one aphorism by one aphorism sort of way, because there's this problem in ontology, like, how do we even know what we know is true is true? well, we can define things in certain ways. It's like, well, okay, but all of our definitions are based on other definitions. Nietzsche just cuts off that hydra at the base and fries the roots with this one thing, the falseness of a judgment. So he just says, let's just screw how we know what we're saying is true. Let's just ask ourselves, or he just asserts this, but by asserting this, he asks a question. He says, is the fact that a judgment is false necessarily an objection to a judgment? In this respect, our new language may sound strangest. That's so strange. How could the falseness of a judgment not be an objection to that judgment? The question is to what extent it is life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. Boom. He hits us with a deeper definition of truth, a pragmatic definition of truth. I believe this is the definition of truth that is ultimately asserted by the incarnation of God. God is not words. The Torah has not left heaven. Christ is in heaven. You know what I mean? It's like Christ is the Word of God, and the Word of God is in heaven, though has come to earth. Whereas the Jews would say the Torah is no longer in heaven, but is on earth. They say that God has reduced himself to words. The Muslims believe the same. They believe the Quran is the literal Word of God, and that it's reducible to that. Christians don't believe that. They believe Jesus Christ himself is the Word of God. This is one of the differences between Christians and every other belief system. This is why I think Beyond Good and Evil is so necessary. I think in order to understand Christianity, you have to think in this way. I mean, this is sort of what led me to understanding Christianity through maps of meaning, through studying Orthodox symbolism, through living this out. Falseness of a judgment is not necessarily an objection to a judgment. In this respect, our new language may sound most strange. He's acknowledging that sounds strange. How could something being false not be an objection to it? And then he's saying, essentially, there's a deeper sort of truth. The question is to what extent it is life-promoting. Yes, April?
It grew?
So put it back. It's going to keep growing. Life-promoting, life-preserving, species-preserving, perhaps even species-cultivating. Again, my children in the video, species-preserving, species-cultivating. You must have children. And I must make videos. So, and we are fundamentally inclined to claim that the falsest judgments, which include the synthetic judgments a priori. So he's saying a synthetic judgment a priori is a judgment of things that are made up against other things, which is mathematics. He's saying including the synthetic judgments a priori are the most indispensable for us, and without accepting the fictions of logic. So then he immediately says, yeah, logic, like A equals A, that's a synthetic judgment a priori. B equals B. If A equals B and B equals C, then A is also equal to C. That's another synthetic judgment a priori. So he says logic. That is without accepting the fiction of logic, without measuring reality against the purely invented world of unconditional and self-identical. So he kind of opens it up a little bit, like, ooh, what's this? Without constant falsification of the world by means of numbers. So then he says, actually, what I just said is actually a representation of falsifying the world by means of representing it in numbers. So he's saying that math is one of these pragmatic lies that hints at a deeper truth, which I'm not saying, like, I don't think the real interpretation of Nietzsche is that we should lie and be deceitful and not value truth and only view things in terms of power. Like, that is not what I would take away from Nietzsche at all, and I'm going to get to that in the other aphorisms. But he's sort of opening it up. He's saying, like, look, like, we're focused on very limited definitions of truth. We're saying, how do we know what's true? Well, synthetic judgments a priori, again. So basically, like, we can have, like, logic, pure logic, A equals A, B equals B. We can have pure math. We can, like, try to ground our reasoning in pure logic and pure math. And he's saying, actually, those are the falsest judgments of all, and the most useful. He's blowing up the idea that we can create the world in language in our heads without acting it out. And that's even where he gets that in Aphorism 3 earlier, where he says, in the yesterday's video, he talks about that. That's Aphorism 3. Go to yesterday's video and watch talk about that. Like, that's the continuation. He's getting out of this limited way of understanding truth, where we have to reason everything through language in our heads. Like, where does that get us? Like, makes us very neurotic. And he's saying this isn't even how things work anyway. Like, look at this. And this is all completely valid. Without falsification of the world by means of number, man cannot live. That is, renounce false judgments between renouncing life and denial of life. To recognize untrue as a condition of life, that certainly means resisting accustomed value feelings in a dangerous way. And a philosophy that risks this would, by that token, already place itself beyond good and evil. So this is where we have the neuroticism of like the Russian Orthodoxy, like Saint Father Seraphim Rose is like incredibly, like go read Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future if you want to see schizophrenic religious thinking on paper, or Unseen Warfare by some other guy. They're of the same vein. He's basically like, these people get so paranoid about being deceived that even numbers, everything that isn't just rocking back and forth trying to think about God without words, becomes a form of deception for these people, and so they become unable to live. I mean, this is where even religious orthodoxy brings us, without an understanding of what Nietzsche's getting at here, without Rumi's statements of beyond good and evil. I mean, this is, again, why is this called Beyond Good and Evil? Because of Rumi, the mystic poet Rumi. There's a field beyond good and evil, and there I will meet you. You can't become a saint until you're a heretic. It's not about being a heretic. It's about being willing to be wrong by living out your understanding to the fullest extent of your understanding, and using your entire being to seek first the kingdom of heaven. And that itself being the logos that creates divine order in words and truth and reality, not artificial constructs of words. I think that's a great place to end this for today. Tune in tomorrow for Aphorism 5.